In no particular order, here are some of the most legendary gamblers ever. Number 12, Charles Barkley. Former NBA All-Star Charles Barkley lost a lot of money at the casino. At one point, he admitted that he probably had a small gambling, let's call it, problem. Thankfully, though, Sir Charles was making a lot of money playing in the NBA, so as long as he didn't bet too much money, he felt he was fine. But that doesn't mean he didn't lose a ton of cash while gambling. In an interview with ESPN in 2006, Barkley admitted to having lost somewhere around $10 million over his entire gambling career. Again, he didn't think it was anything serious since he could afford to lose a few $1,000,000 every now and then. And that was only for the money he's lost since 2006. In 2008, he quit gambling momentarily for 2 years, something that really helped out his gambling habit. Barkley hasn't completely stopped gambling, but when he resumed, his mindset changed quite a bit. At that time, he swore to gamble in, quote, moderation, and he stopped when he lost 200 grand. But did he really keep that promise to himself? Barkley was open about his habits with Seth Davis during an interview. Davis had asked Barkley just how bad his gambling has gotten since his 2-year hiatus from gambling. And this is when Barkley confessed that he had probably lost $1 million on 30 separate occasions for a total gambling loss of somewhere near $30 million. Number 11, Andy Beal. The distinction of biggest poker player ever could belong to Andy Beal. He's a businessman who's made a big fortune in real estate and banking. As of 2021, Forbes places his net worth at roughly $7.9 billion, making him one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. He first ventured into business in high school by repairing and reselling broken TV sets. He later moved on to making his big money starting in real estate. It was the same business model. He made a few fixes here and there on properties, and then he sold them for a big profit. These early business ventures, according to some reports, might have been funded by Beal's poker winnings in college. While that's mostly speculation, his gambling in the 2000s are well known and well documented. Starting in 2001, he started going to Las Vegas to play against some of the best poker players at the time in the biggest games. The professional players were collectively referred to as the Corporation. It consisted of pros such as Ted Forrest, Todd Brunson, Jennifer Herman, and eventually the legendary Phil Ivey. They had pooled their bankrolls together to share the risk and play against Andy. Andy himself proved to be a capable player. For example, in 2004, he won a staggering $11.7 million pot from the Corporation, which was the biggest known pot in the history of poker at the time. But he was playing the best in the world, so in the long run, he was going to lose. Beal would ultimately lose $16 million to the Corporation total, and he made a vow to never play against them again. However, Beal was back at it again in February of 2006 to face off with the Corporation. Andy beat the pros at first for $13.6 million over the course of 3 days, but just like the first time, things were not going to go well for him. This is when the Corporation decided to have Phil Ivey go up against Beal. Ivey went on to beat Beal for $16.6 million in just 3 days. After that embarrassment, Beal never played against the Corporation again. In 2011, there were reports that he had lost over $50 million total in some underground poker games in less than 3 days. If those reports are true, then Beal is known to have lost roughly $70 million lifetime in poker alone. Number 10, Haralabos Voulgaris. Haralabos, or simply Bob, is considered to be one of the biggest sports bettors around. His betting focuses mainly on the NBA. He also dabbled in poker, but basketball was his ultimate profit generator. His dad had a lot to do with that. At 18, Voulgaris frequented Caesar's Palace Casino with his dad. But since he wasn't of legal age to be at the tables, he spent his time watching NBA games in the sportsbook. There at the casino, he placed his first ever bet, which he lost. But he got hooked anyway. He would go on to place wagers on NFL and CFL games throughout college at the University of Manitoba. By the time he graduated, Voulgaris was so good at his craft that he had a sizable chunk of cash, which just meant more gambling for him after school. After he graduated, he focused his betting on the coaching strategies of 3 main coaches: Byron Scott of the New Jersey Nets, Eddie Jordan of the Washington Wizards, and Jerry Sloan of the Utah Jazz. Aside from that, he also noticed a major flaw in how casinos treated individual halves of a game. Basically, they didn't account for the increased likelihood of scoring in the fourth quarter, something that Voulgaris capitalized on. At the height of his gambling career, supposedly, he was betting $1 million daily. With his winning rate of nearly 70%, Voulgaris was simply crushing casinos. But the situation changed once the bookmakers realized their mistake and winning for Voulgaris became harder. In 2005, he worked with a math genius known simply as The Wiz to create a projection system called Ewing. The Wiz finally completed Ewing in 2008. It was an okay system, although Bob said its accuracy kept on dwindling over time, so he had to significantly increase his betting amount to account for the inaccuracy. From 2018, Voulgaris has been employed by the Dallas Mavericks as the Director of Quantitative Research and Development. Number 9. Phil Ivey. Phil is easily one of the best poker players ever, if not the greatest. What hasn't he done in his poker career at this point? One of his career highlights is when he took down billionaire Andy Beal in a high-stakes challenge that saw $16 million change ownership in 3 days. Ivey started playing cards at an early age. As a kid, he went up regularly with his grandfather. He moved on later to the poker tables in Atlantic City, where he was known as No Home Jerome. That's because that was the name he had on the fake ID he used, and players would see him around the clock at the poker tables. Those first years weren't great on the pockets for Ivey because he would routinely lose all his money, but it was those experiences that transformed him into the most feared poker player. His first major victory was in 2000 when he won his first ever World Series of Poker bracelet. 2 years later, he got another 3, all in the same year. Ivey eventually accumulated 10 WSOP bracelets. In his poker career, he's accumulated over $26 million strictly in tournament winnings. But Phil's also played in some of the biggest cash games online and live. He has legendary hands on the show High Stakes Poker, as well as huge wins online when Full Tilt Poker was still around. Many insiders speculate that his cash winnings in poker easily pushes his poker earnings well over $100 million. Number 8. Billy Waters. Now a businessman and philanthropist, Billy remains one of the most notable legends in the gambling world. He started gambling when he was just 9 years old. This was only natural considering that his dad was a passionate poker player and his uncle was a professional gambler. He started his gambling career off with a big losing streak. Reportedly, he had lost 50 grand by the time he was 22 and even lost his house at one point. Lucky for Billy, though, guy who he lost to allowed him to settle the debt in 18 months instead of actually taking his house. With time, Billy got so good that he went on to amass millions of dollars in winnings, specifically betting on basketball and football. And his winnings weren't the rare one-off events. Billy definitely knew what he was doing. We're talking about a 30-year winning streak, which is enough to make anyone filthy rich. On average, Billy pulled in $15 million a year in profit. Today, he's reportedly worth $100 million, most of which is thanks to his incredibly successful gambling career. Throughout his life, he's gotten in trouble with the law several times, but never went to prison. But in 2017, he was found guilty for the first time for insider trading. Billy was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served 2 years of the sentence before being pardoned by former President Donald Trump. Number 7. Patrick Antonius. The Finnish poker pro wasn't always destined to be a legend in the poker world. Career-wise, he had 2 other options, which were tennis and modeling. From very early on, he dabbled in both of these spaces, but tended to favor tennis, and he was once thought to be a rising tennis star in his home country. But everything changed at 18 when he went with his friends to a casino. His entire life changed as he went on to play poker for a living. Antonius has over $12 million in tournament wins in poker. In 2005, he had his first score when he came in second place in the 5 Diamond World Poker Classic tournament in Las Vegas. That earned him a little over $1 million in the process. His biggest cash in a tournament came in 2018 when he came in second place in the Super High Roller Tournament in Macau for $3.1 million. His tournament poker isn't what made him a legend. It's for his legendary pots playing cash games on the show High Stakes Poker and playing online at Full Tilt Poker. To this day, Antonius still holds the record for the biggest online poker hand ever. He won a little over $1.3 million for his hand against Victor Blom in 2009. Number 6. Zoltan Oranagic. Australian-born Oranagic is one of the biggest gamblers ever. His entry into gambling started back when he was in college when he worked at a part-time casino. During his free time, he would try his hand at blackjack in an effort to learn how to make the perfect blackjack plays. Oranagic went on to quit his job to pursue his gambling career. But with his inconsistent wins, Oranagic was later banned from the Australian casinos, so he switched his attention to Las Vegas. But the same thing happened. He simply made too much money at the tables to avoid drawing attention. Zelchko wasn't interested in getting a real job, so he looked into other games to make money. He tried almost every table game and slot games available, and he discovered his most profitable game was Keno. He once set the record for the world's largest Keno jackpot for roughly $7.5 million in 1994. Later on, Zelchko began online gambling with horse racing. At one time, supposedly, a third of all the bets placed on Betfair were placed by Zelchko. Around the same period, he supposedly also accounted for 6 to 8% of Australia's largest gambling company, Tabcorp's annual $10 billion revenue. Even though he's been called the world's biggest gambler and he's speculated to have roughly 600 million Australian dollar net worth, Oranagic has denied both and said it's all been a big exaggeration. Number 5. Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is still the biggest name in basketball, and it's well known that MJ had a thing for gambling. His first betting activity to leak to the public was back in 1991. Jordan used a 2-day break to allegedly go gamble at the tables. That same year, a prolific and, let's just call him, unsavory character named James Buhler was arrested and discovered to have a $57,000 check from MJ. While he tried to explain the purpose of the funds, Jordan later owned up that the check was indeed for his gambling losses to Buhler. But more was to come. In 1992, the police once again ran into several of Jordan's big checks while investigating the death of Eddie Dow, a bail bond. These checks totaled $108,000, and according to Dow's attorney, they were MJ's settlement of gambling debt. More of MJ's ways were exposed in 1993 when Richard Esquinas released his book titled Michael and Me, Our Gambling Addiction, My Cry for Help. In the book, Esquinas said Jordan had owed him a whopping $1.25 million for gambling while playing golf. But since he was having a hard time convincing the former champ to pay up, Esquinas had to make do with the $300,000 that MJ agreed to pay. There are theories that MJ's first retirement from basketball in 1994 really was a secret 2-year suspension by then NBA Commissioner David Stern for his gambling. Number 4. Terence Watanabe. Terry was a business heir to the Oriental Trading Company, which was launched by his dad, Harry Watanabe, in 1932. Terry certainly did well to grow the family business. He took over the company in 1977 and changed the focus of his family's company to party good. That was a wise business decision on his part. Oriental Trading Company's revenue ballooned to an average of $300 million after the switch. That was a success by any measure, and you'd expect anyone who's part of such a business to stick around. But because his entire life had been growing the family business, Terry decided to retire early. In 2000, he sold his entire stake and resigned as CEO and president. The details on the sale were not publicly available, but how much Terry gambled away offered at least some clue on how big the deal was. With his new windfall, Terry headed to one of the largest gambling cities in the world, Las Vegas. Not so good decision, as he was to later find out. Soon enough, he became revered in Las Vegas casinos as the biggest of the biggest high rollers. Because he gambled so big, he got special privileges no one else got. At Caesar's Palace, for instance, they created a special high roller tier for him, the chairman. That tier ranked above the highest publicly known tier called 7 stars. The chairman tier gave Terry a monthly allowance of $12.5 grand in airline tickets and $500 grand worth of credit in Caesar's gift shops. At one point, Terry gambled so much that he accounted for roughly 5.6% of all of Caesar's property's gambling revenues for 2007. Terry's favorite casino for blowing away his fortune included Caesar's Palace, the Rio, and Wynn Las Vegas. After several years, he lost a jaw-dropping supposed amount, $204 million. Unfortunately, in 2017, Watanabe had to organize a GoFundMe fundraiser to pay for his medical bills. Number 3. Guy Liberte. This Canadian is another billionaire on the list who has plenty of money to burn. He began his career as a street performer, and that's around the time Liberte co-founded Cirque du Soleil, one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. Liberte's first big breakthrough came in 1984 when he was funded by the Canadian government to perform on the 450th anniversary of the discovery of Canada. That's basically how Cirque du Soleil got started. Cirque du Soleil was originally supposed to run for only a year, but the Canadian government wanted wanted an ongoing tour in other provinces. When he was not busy giving creative direction to Cirque, Liberte is busy donating money to high-stakes professionals at the poker tables and also donating to charities. Liberte has famously played on high-stakes poker when he's involved in big pots, but he's mostly known for his massive online poker cash game loss. His 6 online accounts have reportedly lost a total of $31 million, making him the biggest loser in online poker. Number 2, Archie Caruso. This gambling story is that of rags to riches and then back to rags. Archie's famous for the largest and longest documented winning streak in casino gambling history. That streak is just known as The Run. Archie drove to Las Vegas with all just $50 in his pocket back in December of 1992. At that time, he was a well-known poker pro in Los Angeles. He'd routinely borrow money from different people and run his bankroll up to a couple $1 million, but then lose it all. This is what happened when he left for Las Vegas with $50. Caruso was known as one of the best Raz players in the world at any time, so he was easily able to keep up a loan for $10 grand when he got to Las Vegas. And instead of running that money up to just $1 million or $2 million, he turned that money into more than $40 million in a little over 2 weeks. He quickly tripled 10 grand into 30 grand in around 3 months. For 6 months, Archie got to $40 million in playing poker, rookie, and playing pool. According to Jack Binion, Archie was the biggest gambler he had ever seen. For example, Caruso would play pool for up to 40 grand a game. Archie made the first $1 million by playing pool with a big gambler. He then switched to poker with the same gambler and won $3 million more in only a few days. He decided to stick to poker. For a period of 6 months, Archie won millions of dollars from the world's best poker players at the time, bringing his total to $17 million. He was able to beat legendary players such as Chip Reese and Stu Unger for millions of dollars. Because his reputation and the stakes were too big for a lot of players, the action dried up. Archie then simply decided to leave his fate to chance and switch to craps and baccarat. And that's how he won the rest of his $23 million. Caruso was carrying around so much cash that he would have security guards escort him all over the place. But instead of leaving up huge, he undecided to continue playing. And the rest is just gambling history. In roughly 3 weeks, Caruso lost over $30 million playing the same games along with a little bit of poker in between. He decided to take a month-long break to try to change his luck. But when he came back, the results did not change. He ended up losing the rest of the money playing craps and baccarat. Number 1, Jimmy Chagra. He was a huge legendary figure during his gambling life in Las Vegas. While he didn't have much luck at the tables, he was known to be a high-stakes gambler and a big tipper to anyone helping him out in Vegas. There are stories of Chagra playing all 6 spots on a blackjack table for $25,000 a hand. Supposedly, a pit boss once asked Jimmy if the casino could borrow $5 million from him. The casino was short on cash because they had been hit hard by some high rollers, something Jimmy said yes to. He also supposedly paid off one cocktail waitress's $50,000 mortgage when he heard she was raising 3 kids by herself. These are just a few of the legendary stories from Vegas surrounding Jimmy Chagra. All that cash to gamble with came from his successful, let's call it, illegal substances business. In the 1970s, Chagra was a big-time trafficker. At the height of his business, he reportedly had as much as $100 million in his bank accounts, an equivalent of close to $500 million in 2021. Chagra's glory as a high roller soon came to an end in August 1979 when he was finally sentenced to 30 years on drug trafficking charges. He was later released in 2003 amidst health concerns and succumbed to cancer in 2008. Here's what's next.